My half-sister set me up, making it seem like I was responsible for causing her allergic reaction. As a result, my 3 brothers locked me in a tiny, unventilated basement. They chained the door while I weakly knocked, begging them to let me out. João, my older brother and business magnate, scolded me ruthlessly before leaving. It's bad enough that you always pick on Ana, but cooking seafood knowing she's allergic? Did you want to kill her? Stay there and think about what you've done. Pedro, my second brother and an emerging musical star, and Rafael, my third brother and a talented painter, looked at me with disdain. Someone as cruel as you keeps making excuses and playing the victim, they said with contempt. You better stay there and pay the consequences. With that, they carried my trembling half-sister Ana in their arms and rushed her to the hospital. As the oxygen dwindled, each breath became heavier until I finally suffocated in that basement. 3 days later, when my brothers returned from the hospital with Ana, they finally remembered me. But it was too late. I had died from lack of air in that grim place. When I opened my eyes again, I realized my spirit was floating beside my 3 brothers. They had just returned to the mansion. João and Pedro were carefully helping Ana, speaking to her with tenderness. I'm glad we got to the hospital in time. You're recovering quickly, João said. Rafael also showed clear concern. The doctor said your body is still weak and you need to eat well, he commented. Then, very solicitous, he offered her a big piece of meat. One of the maids intervened timidly. Young masters, Miss Clara hasn't made any noise in the basement for the past 3 days. João snorted and interrupted her. Today is a happy day. Ana is back from the hospital. Why bring up that problem? The maid tried to insist, but Pedro and Rafael's cold stares made her fall silent. That wretch should have known about the seafood allergy and purposely prepared a meal full of it. Pedro spat angrily. And I thought she would finally accept Ana, but everything was premeditated. Rafael nodded, irritated. Ana, scared and everything, had to go to the hospital because of her. And that woman still hasn't shown her face. With a fearful gesture, Ana said in a timid voice, Brother, Clara is being punished because of me. She's been locked in that basement for so many days. What if she comes out furious with me? João's face hardened. Don't worry, Ana. We were too lenient with her. She never faced real consequences. After this lesson, she won't bother you again. As he spoke, he instinctively checked his phone to look at our message history. The last ones were from 3 days ago. During all this time, I hadn't sent a single text or called. João's eyes lit up with rage. That ungrateful. Days passed, and not once did she ask how Ana was. Ana squeezed João's hand and said, in a choked voice, I just wanted my sister to spend time with me. I never wanted to take anything from her. João put his phone aside and gently petted Ana's head. You are so noble, Ana. Unlike her. She's just ungrateful. Pedro's eyes filled with disdain as he remembered me. That's true. She dared to hurt the family just to get attention. She's truly despicable. Rafael agreed fervently. Unless she learns her lesson and kneels to beg Ana for forgiveness, I'll personally kick her out of this house. I, in my spectral form, heard every word and could only laugh bitterly at the absurdity of the situation. No one noticed my presence. Since our parents died when I was little, my 3 brothers dedicated themselves entirely to me. One day, I said I wanted someone my age to play with. So, they went to an orphanage and adopted Ana as my half-sister. At first, I was happy with Ana's arrival, but whenever we were around my brothers, she made me seem bad. Slowly, our bond broke, to the point where this time, they didn't hesitate to lock me in that tiny basement. I struggled to save myself, but the air grew more scarce. I knocked on the door repeatedly, begging them to let me out. They just looked at me coldly. What are you complaining about? This is your fault. If it weren't for you, Ana wouldn't have suffered that allergic attack. We've pampered her too much, that's why she keeps mistreating her. Stay there and repent for what you've done. With these words, Pedro locked the chains around the door, while Rafael piled heavy objects in front of it, blocking any escape. Now, seeing Ana smile falsely at my brothers only provoked a bitter and sarcastic sigh from me. Brothers. The sister who loved you most in this world died by your own hands. Ana tugged at João's sleeve, appearing shy. Brother, please don't be angry. It's my fault for being so weak and having an allergy. I'm sure Clara didn't do this with bad intentions. Please don't blame her so much. João's expression darkened further, and he spoke harshly. That girl. We've spoiled her too much, and that's why she became so arrogant. Pedro's eyes gleamed with contained fury. The more she grows, the more selfish she becomes. If it weren't for her, Ana wouldn't be going through all of this. Ana then showed her arms and legs, where there were still faint marks from the skin irritation, to the three brothers. Those red spots were the living proof of my supposed betrayal. Rafael gently ran his hand over the marks. Does it still hurt, Ana? She lowered her gaze, pretending she was about to cry. It doesn't really hurt. I'm fine. Pedro's anger erupted completely. If we had gotten to the hospital any later, this could have cost her life. And after all these days, Clara hasn't even sent a message, not even an attempt to apologize. João, full of rage, declared, "Go get the ungrateful one. I want her to apologize here, right now. I want her to prove to me that she has the slightest bit of remorse." Pedro and Rafael agreed. Yes. She's so confident because we've always protected her. I was there, trapped in my spectral form, watching the unfolding of such a deep injustice that I could barely contain my fury. They, my brothers, the same ones who had promised to protect me when our parents passed, were now fully caught in Anna's cruel manipulation, while my death seemed like a mere inconvenience. No one missed me until it was too late. And even then, there was no trace of regret or sorrow from them, only disdain, only hate. I watched Ana delight in her false vulnerability. She kept that victimized look, the moist eyes she always used to bend my brothers to her favor. So fragile, so innocent, they thought. But I knew the truth. I knew she had planned everything from the moment she came to our house. Ana never wanted to be my sister. She wanted my place, my affection, my family. And now she had succeeded. Every word that left João, Pedro, and Rafael's mouths felt like a dagger piercing my spirit. She was ungrateful, she was selfish, she only knew how to cause trouble. The echo of these accusations reverberated in my mind, drowning me in a mix of sadness and fury. Did they really believe I was capable of something as low as hurting Ana on purpose? After everything I went through, after everything I did for them, I was the monster, while she used the poison of lies to cast herself as the perfect victim. I watched them that night, around the table, celebrating Anna's recovery as if nothing had happened. While they laughed and toasted, I felt something different inside me. My rage grew like a wave, something I had never felt before. I was dead, yes, but I was not powerless. Not this time. I started testing the limits of what my new form could do. When Ana got up to grab a glass of water, an uncontrollable rage consumed me. The moment she touched the glass, it slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. She widened her eyes, surprised, but quickly assumed her usual victim pose. "Must be the exhaustion," she murmured, while Rafael helped her, ever so attentive. But that was just the beginning. The following days were marked by small events. Objects disappeared, doors locked by themselves, lights flickered. At first, they thought it was all a coincidence, but when Pedro, distracted, dropped a tray full of food in front of Ana, I saw something rare, a shadow of irritation cross her face. Perfect. It was working. She began to lose control. She tried to keep her mask on, but small slips revealed who she really was. One night, when she thought she was alone, I heard her voice. "This house is mine now. I won't let anyone ruin this." Rafael, who was walking down the hallway, stopped upon hearing it. He entered the room, confused. "What did you say, Ana?" "Nothing," she quickly responded. "I was just thinking out loud." For the first time, I saw doubt appear in one of their eyes, and I knew it was only the beginning. My actions grew bolder. One night, while João was reviewing documents in his office, I slammed the door shut. He looked up, startled, and saw my pale, unmoving face reflected in the mirror behind him. He quickly turned around, but saw nothing. Must be the wind, he murmured, but his expression showed he didn't believe that. Anna began to notice that something was wrong. She became nervous, paranoid, glancing over her shoulder even when surrounded by my brothers. And then, one night, she made a fatal mistake. During a heated argument with Pedro, she let her true face slip. You guys have always been so easy to deceive. I'm the perfect victim, aren't I? Always defending poor Anna, fragile Anna, while Clara died because of your stupidity. The silence that followed was deafening. João, Pedro, and Rafael were paralyzed. None of them expected to hear something like that. Finally, Anna's mask had fallen. Pedro was the first to react. What did you say? His voice was low but filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Doubt. Anna tried to correct herself, but it was too late. I didn't mean that. It was a moment of anger. You know I loved Clara, but they were no longer convinced. Finally, the pieces started to fall into place. The little lies, the manipulations, the looks, the fake smiles. It was all there, right in front of them, and they had been blind all this time. João slowly stood up, his face marked by guilt. We let her die. And you knew. Anna tried to defend herself, but Rafael interrupted her. Shut up. You played with all of us. Clara died because of us, but you're the one who should have been in that basement. As I watched the scene, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. They were finally seeing the truth. But it wasn't enough. The pain they caused was still there, alive in me. And I knew they could never repair what they had done. That night, while Anna tried to explain herself in vain, I saw my brothers distancing themselves from her one by one. João ordered her to leave the house the next day. There's no place for you here anymore. She tried to cry, to beg, but it didn't work. And I, for the first time in a long time, smiled. They had lost me forever, but now they knew who the real culprit was. Let them carry that guilt for the rest of their lives. They finally saw the truth, saw Anna for who she really was. The manipulator who destroyed everything that remained of our family. But, as I watched them distancing themselves from her, I realized something that gnawed at me from the inside. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for them just to know they were wrong. It wasn't enough for them just to expel Anna from the house. My brothers, the three of them, had blood on their hands. They were guilty too and deserved to pay. Their guilt went beyond letting me die in that basement. They ignored my screams, my pleas. They blindly believed Anna, even when everything pointed the other way. And, above all, they betrayed me. Since our parents died, they were all I had. I trusted them, and they repaid me with abandonment, cruelty, and indifference. As I watched Anna leave the house that night, crying and begging for the last time, something within me changed. There was no more sadness, just rage. It wasn't just Anna who needed to face the consequences of her actions. My brothers needed to too. And I would make them feel on their skin what I felt. The first days after Anna's departure were strange. The house was silent, but not peaceful. The weight of guilt hung in the air. I saw João isolating himself in the office, papers scattered across the table that he didn't even read. Pedro spent hours at the piano, playing dark melodies, while Rafael just stared at blank canvases, unable to paint. But that still wasn't enough. That night, I decided to start with João, the oldest. He had always been the leader, the one who made decisions, the one who should have been wiser. He was sitting in his armchair, a bottle of whiskey in hand, when I made the lights flicker. He looked up, confused, but didn't move. Then, I knocked the papers off his desk, scattering them across the floor. He jumped up. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I didn't respond. Instead, I made his chair spin on its own and slammed the office door shut. He ran to the door and tried to open it, but it was locked. In the silence that followed, I began to whisper, low but loud enough for him to hear. "You let me die, João." His eyes widened as he looked around, but he couldn't see me. His breath quickened. "Clara." He seemed to want to convince himself it was just his imagination. I continued. "You heard me scream and ignored me. You locked me in there to die." He started banging on the door, trying to get out, but I didn't let him. The fear in his eyes was palpable, and I fed off of it. He needed to feel what I felt. When I finally opened the door, he ran out of the office, pale, muttering that he was going crazy. With Pedro, I was different. He had always been the emotional one, the one who was carried away by his feelings. It was easy to mess with him. I waited until he was at the piano, lost in one of his melancholic melodies. When he started playing, I shifted the keys, making the dissonant sounds echo throughout the room. He stopped, confused, and tried again, but the notes came out wrong. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured, looking at the keys. Then, I let fall an old photograph of the four of us, our parents, me, and him, from the shelf above. He stood up to grab it and froze when he saw the glass of the frame cracked, right over my image. "You forgot me, Pedro." My voice echoed through the room. He dropped the frame, trembling. "Clara, this isn't real." But it was, and he knew it. He fell to his knees, holding his head, as if he wanted to erase my words, but I continued, making him remember every moment he chose Anna over me. When he ignored my pleas for help. When he put the chains on that door. He ran out of the room, tears streaming down his face, muttering apologies that could no longer fix anything. Rafael was the last. He had always been the coldest, the hardest to reach, but even he had his weak points. I waited until he was in the studio, staring at a blank screen. I used my energy to draw red lines on the screen, forming words. "You killed me." He recoiled, startled, knocking over the paints on the floor. He tried to erase the lines, but they wouldn't go away. "This isn't possible," he said, panting. Then I started moving things around in the studio, knocking over brushes, spilling paints. He screamed, asking for it to stop, but I didn't stop. I wanted him to feel the desperation, the helplessness, the guilt I felt. When I finally left the studio in silence, he collapsed to the floor, staring at the screen with empty eyes. Days turned into weeks, and my brothers began to wither. João stopped leaving the office, trapped in his own guilt. Pedro no longer played music. He just sat there, staring into the void. Rafael abandoned his paintings, unable to create anything. The house, once full of life, was now a mausoleum of regret and pain. I could have stopped there. I could have let the guilt consume them slowly, but it wasn't enough. They needed to face their actions. They needed to admit what they had done. One night, I made them all gather in the main room. Each one was guided by my presence, by an impulse they couldn't ignore. When they were all together, I made the lights flicker and spoke, for the first time, clearly. "You let me die." They looked at each other, terrified, and began to cry. They begged for forgiveness, promised to change, but I knew that would never erase what they had done. They would carry that guilt for the rest of their lives, just as I carried the weight of their betrayal until my last breath. And finally, when I felt my mission was complete, I left the house in silence. Not because I had forgiven them, but because I knew they would never forgive themselves. That would be their true punishment.